So this is going to be a little different than my typical video where I read from a script and try to sound a little more professional. This way, I'm actually just going to kind of riff off of some notes that I took from the Horus Heresy novel series. In this first video, we'll be going over Horus Rising by Dan Abnett, which lays the groundwork of how Horus fell to chaos. I'd like to also make videos about the other books in the series because they are also phenomenal books, but we'll just start with Horus Rising. So let's kick it off from the beginning. Horus Rising, Part 1, The Deceived. The story starts out in the 203rd year of the Great Crusade. Horus Lupercal is serving as War Master, and he's held this position for about 1 year at this point. And their first major engagement is on the world of 6319. It's named 6319 because it is the 19th world that the 63rd Expeditionary Force has brought into compliance of the Imperium. The humans of this world claim that they serve the true Emperor of Mankind, and this must be dealt with because it's heretical. So Horus sends down Captain Sejanus as part of the first envoy to the world, and Sejanus is murdered by the Invisibles, who serve as the Praetorian Guard to the false Emperor. Now Horus is very upset by this, so he sends 4 companies of Space Marines to attack this planet, and these companies are led by Ezekiel Abaddon, Horus Axeman, Tarek Targadon, and Garvio Loken, who will be playing a major part in this story. Eventually Horus joins in the battle, and he's the one who slays this false emperor. After the battle, we cut back to the Vengeful Spirit, which is Horus's flagship, and we are introduced to these people called the Remembrancers. Now, Remembrancers were assigned to the Crusade by the Council of Terra, which are essentially the ruling elites of Earth. One of these Remembrancers is Mercedes Alaton, and she begins to develop this professional relationship with Loken as his personal Remembrancer. During this time on the ship, the other 3 captains, Abaddon, Targadon, and Axeman, invite Loken to join Horus's unofficial inner circle called Mournival, and he would be replacing Sejanus as their 4th member. Now, Loken had already been conflicted with the war on 6319 and why they were waging the war in the first place. So he goes to his good friend Kirill Sinderman about the morality of the war and whether or not he should join the Mournival or not. Sinderman urges Loken to accept the appointment because his morality would be a great asset to the other members of the Mournival. So we cut back to 6319, and a group of iterators are speaking to a bunch of the Remembrancers and citizens of the planet, and they're going over their plans for reconstruction of the planet and the capital city that took the brunt of the assault. There is a Remembrancer there by the name of Ignis Carcassy, and his medium of choice is poetry. Carcassy eventually slips away from the event, gets drunk, and finds a temple, and there in the temple he finds his inspiration to write about. His inspiration is quite gloomy and black-pilled, and then he eventually runs his mouth to a bunch of Imperial soldiers, and he's beaten senselessly for saying this kind of stuff. So we then cut back to Loken and the rest of the Mournival, and the 4 of them are playing politics with Horus and his war council. Horus has what's called an equerry, and his name is Malachurst the Twisted. He has this twisted philosophical view, but he's also been wounded in battle and has this malformed physique, so the name fits him quite well. During the war council, one of the generals informs that there is still a pocket of resistance at this mountain range called the Whisperhead Mountains. Now, the Imperial army has been unable to remove the insurgents, so Loken volunteers his company, the 10th Company, to go down and stamp them out. Horus agrees and is pleased that Loken has this initiative. Also present at the War Council is the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, Rogel Dorn, and he is the one who tells Loken that he had suggested Loken join the Mournival, mostly for his character and his ambition to take the 10th Company back to the planet to stamp out the resistance. As the 10th Company is preparing to go down to 6319, Loken has to take his Oath of Moment. Now, an oath of moment is when an Astartes reaffirms his commitment to the Imperium, to his legion, and to the mission at hand. And the imagery of Loken kneeling in front of his brother Mournival members is such a powerful scene that the Remembrancer, Euphrates Keeler, takes a picture of it, and it becomes a somewhat famous picture amongst the Remembrancers in the 63rd expedition. As 10th Company is approaching their drop site on the Whisperhead Mountains, there's this voice that comes across their Vox communications. Now, this voice is claiming to be this being called Samus. Now, this voice is saying things like,
Samus, that's the only name you hear. Samus is all around you. Samus is the man behind you. Samus will gnaw upon your bones.
But they just chalk it up to some kind of scare tactic used by the rebels. The 10th Company lands at this structure, which has been determined to be some kind of temple, and the rebels had turned into their base of operations. And they had used the newly issued Terminator armor to completely decimate these forces, but they had to go deep inside to root them all out. So during this battle, Loken is contacted by one of his sergeants, Sergeant Xavier Jubal, claiming that he sees Samus. And then Loken eventually meets up with Jubal, and then Jubal suddenly turns on his brother Astartes and shoots several of them dead, claiming to be Samus. Loken is forced to do the unthinkable and kill his brother Astartes, which is an unthinkable act at this time. But while this is happening, several of the Remembrancers were allowed to join the strike force and document the final battle of 6319, and among them were Kirill Sinderman and Euphrates Keeler. The Remembrancers were told to wait outside while the Space Marines finished up on the inside of the temple. During this time, Loken calls for Kirill Sinderman to join him inside so he can help him assess what just happened to Jubal. Some of the Remembrancers who actually wanted to document the aftermath of an Astartes attack snuck away from their military escort and went inside the temple. And one of these Remembrancers was obviously Euphrates Keeler. So as she's going inside this temple, she's taking pictures of these gruesome scenes of like bodies torn apart or exploded by bolters or cut in half by chainswords. And she's just really realizing like this is the true gruesome aspect of what the Crusade has been the entire time. As these Remembrancers are making their way deeper and deeper into the temple, Sinderman and Loken are discussing what could have possibly happened to Jubal. And Loken is thinking, it has to be this demon Samus. This is the only explanation I can think of. It has to be it. And Sinderman, who's preaching the Imperial truth, which is a secular truth that there are no demons or gods in the universe, is making this rational argument it has to be this disease or something that made him lose his mind, thinking he was the demon Samus, seeing as how he had just heard about it. And as Loken is just about to be willing to buy this theory, Jubal's corpse stands up and has this smirk or grin on his face as his body begins to bloat with these lesions and pustule warts and things like that, and becomes this grotesque creature. And as Jubal is turning into this grotesque abomination, he starts making his way out of the temple. And Loken is like, I have to do something about this. And then we cut back to Euphrates and her perspective, and then she sees this creature, this unknown monster, running at her down the hallway, and it kills two of the other Remembrancers that she's with. One of them, it bites in half with this disgusting maw of fangs that it has, and just as it's about to kill Euphrates, Loken kills it with his bolter. So back on the ship, Abaddon debriefs Loken, telling him he has to stay silent about what happened to Jubal, and if the only two Remembrancers, Sinderman and Euphrates, try to say anything about it, just say it's a Xenos beast, and that's that. Despite the fact that Loken and his company defeated the rebels, Loken was still convinced that he had failed the War Master by what had happened, how many Astartes he had lost, even though none of the rebels were the ones that killed them. So Horus comes down to talk to Loken and explain to him that no, he had not failed his mission. He had fulfilled his oath of moment. He had killed the rebels. He had done right by his Space Marines. He had done honor to the 10th Company and things like that. So Loken accepts what the War Master says to him, but then Horus explains the powers of the warp to him. Now Loken knows about the warp. That's how they travel faster than light in the Imperium. He knows that psychers and astropaths can be corrupted by its powers. He had no idea that space marines could be corrupted by it. Horus tells him that there are things out in the warp that might call themselves spirits, or they might call themselves demons, but in reality they are just another Xenos to fight, just like every other one. Horus then continues to tell Loken why he was made War Master, and why the Emperor really went back to Terra. The Emperor is trying to conquer the warp, and if the Emperor were to fail, then the Crusades would be for nothing. Part 2. Brotherhood in Spireland. At the beginning of Part 2, we cut to Murder, or designated 14020. The 63rd Expedition and a task force of the Emperor's children are responding to a distress signal by the Blood Angels. Lord Commander Eidolon of the Emperor's children is the first to make contact, and he refuses to wait for Horus and the Luna Wolves, so he decides to order a drop to the planet's surface. The surface of Murder is just this tall grass and arid landscape, so we cut to Saul Tarvitz and Lucius of the Emperor's children, and they begin to be ambushed by these things called the Megarachnids, giant alien spider monsters. Their communications are blocked, and it appears to be like a complete death trap, aptly named for the planet. We cut back to Loken. He's going through Jabal's things and finds a lodge insignia. Now, a lodge insignia is like a silver or brass coin that these lodge members carry with them. Loken forbids his men from joining these lodges because he deems it to be secretive, and that just completely goes against what the legions are all about. Loken finds out that one of his most trusted men, Neurovipus, is a member of the lodge, but Horus Axaman talks to Loken about the lodges and eventually brings him to a meeting. The other Mournival members are present, including Targaden, which is surprising to Loken. And it's not a secretive cult like Loken thought, it's just guys being dudes, or it's more or less a fraternity for the Astartes. Later, Loken meets with Kirill Sinderman, who has been doing research into demons, and he appears to be very shaken about what happened on 6319. And again, Mercedes asks Loken to sponsor Carcassy, if not only for the fact that he doesn't shy away from the truth, no matter how bleak it is, Loken will sponsor him. So Loken meets with Carcassy and explains he has some ground rules that must be followed in order to be sponsored. Most importantly, to always tell the truth. Loken then meets with Euphrates and is concerned with her behavior. She's excessively drinking, she's become very promiscuous. They return to her room where she shows Loken a picture she took of the Jubal creature. Loken fears he may have to silence her like the other Mournival members had said, but she promises that she will accept the official story that it was just some Xenos creature. After Loken leaves, she reveals a hidden shrine to the Emperor, where she begins praying to it. Back on Murder, the Emperor's children turn the tide of the battle and begin to push their Megarachnids back. The Emperor's children find these massive stone trees that these Megarachnids have been using to impale bodies of space marines on. Tarvitz says they should blow up the trees because they can't just leave their brother Astartes dangling from them, but Eidolon says it would be a waste of ammunition and explosives. However, they do end up destroying the trees and freeing the Vox channels up. So when the trees are destroyed, the cloud coverage over the planet kind of disperses and opens up the channel for the Vox communication. So with their comms reopened, the Luna Wolves are able to make contact, and Targaden comes up to meet with the Emperor's children. He's not impressed with Eidolon, but he becomes friends with Tarvitz and Lucius. The war on Murder lasts a few more months, and is eventually aided by Sanguinius and the Blood Angels. Horus is pleased his brother Primarch is able to join him, and after all the Megarachnids are killed, an alien ship appears in the system playing music, or what appears to be music, over the communications. These aliens turn out to be a group called the Interrex, a human and alien coalition that tried to warn the Imperium about the planet. Part 3. The Dreadful Sagittary. After some communications, the Interrex revealed that they were the ones who imprisoned the Megarachnids on Murder, and that if the Imperium hadn't ignored their warnings, they could have been spared what happened on the planet. Horus apologizes to them in an attempt to save face, To further hold negotiations, the expedition travels to the Interrex homeworld. Now, while the Interrex are humans, they do hold Xenos customs due to the assimilated Xenos into their culture, and Abaddon argues that this should disqualify them from joining the Imperium, but Horus disagrees. The Interrex are very hesitant to negotiate with the Imperium, staying neutral about joining them or not joining them. Many in the expedition petition Horus to just conquer them outright and move on with the crusade, but Horus, again, disagrees. Horus then gives a speech to his Mournival about the time he first met the Emperor, and the Emperor had told him, "Make no mistake, and those stars will be ours," in reference to the galaxy and how they're going to conquer the lost colonies of humanity. It's becoming clear that the weight of being War Master is starting to weigh heavily on Horus, starting with the death of Sejanus and the war on 6319. Horus is holding out hope for a more peaceful assimilation with the Interrex, despite what his father would wish. So Loken joins Horus's entourage to the reception of the Interrex homeworld, and they have a great reception, and later on, while Loken is on guard duty that night, he begins talking with his Interrex counterpart, who tells Loken why they are kind of hesitant to treat with the Imperium. The Interrex feared the Imperium were corrupted by chaos, something they had learned from the Eldar and knew just how dangerous it could be. They were afraid that it could possibly appear to them as a friendly force trying to trick them and weasel their way into their culture. Horus had at one point told Loken there was no fundamental evil at work throughout the galaxy, but based on what he had seen on 6319, Loken was beginning to understand what the Guard was telling him. Loken and this Guard seemed to be bridging the gap that divided the Interrex and the Imperium, but then suddenly, an alarm went off. The Guard quickly turned accusative against Loken, demanding they turn over his weapons. Now, Loken could not comply, and he started questioning what was going on. The Guard started saying that Loken almost had him, and he believed he was truly his friend. The Guard reveals that there had been a break-in at the Interrex Museum, which housed dangerous Xenos weapons, and then they begin to fight. But Loken was not willing to kill this guy, so he just knocks him out. A battle erupts throughout the complex and into the city, where other Luna Wolves had been attacked. Horus begs for the fighting to stop, but he's ignored by the Interrex, leaving him with no other option but to fight. We then cut to Loken retelling the story to Mercedes Alaton about how the Luna Wolves subjected the Interrex, but it was nothing to celebrate. The whole conflict had stemmed from the belief that the Imperium had stolen a Xenos weapon called the Anathame, which is a semi-sentient Xenos blade. So Loken's only solace in the fight was seeing how Horus led his men with courage and feeling more confident that the Emperor had picked the right man to be War Master. Meanwhile, deep in the heart of the Vengeful Spirit, the first chaplain of the Word Bearers, Erebus, was examining the stolen Anathame. So it turns out that they were responsible for the conflict. Now, Erebus was only there as an advisory position to Horus, so what he was doing with the blade is yet unknown to us. We then cut to Euphrates Keeler, who is praying to the Emperor and thanking him for choosing Horus as the War Master, and how she's thankful for his legion, now called the Sons of Horus. We then just cut back to Mercedes asking Loken where they're heading to next, to which Loken says they're traveling to a moon at the request of Erebus, a moon called Davin, and that is Horus Rising by Dan Abnett. Now, I would consider the first 3 books in the Horus Heresy series to be more of a trilogy than, the overarching series, because the first 3 books follow essentially the same characters. So the setting in this book really lays down the groundwork for the next 2 books by Graham McNeil and Ben Counter, respectively, False Gods and Galaxy in Flames. Now, based on how many books there are in the series, there's about 54 of the books in the series, and some of these books aren't necessarily in chronological order. So I see it more feasible just to cover the first 3 books, the overarching story of them in this series. But depending on how well this does, I wouldn't mind going into the other aspects of the entire heresy as well. I hope you enjoyed the video, and keep an eye out for the next installment of this series. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow for more. Until next time.